How could it be possible that a healer, sitting somewhere and looking at a screen, just by applying their thought and using some simple technique, could have a major impact on the life of somebody else hundreds or maybe thousands of miles away? Can it really be a thing? That's a question I often ask myself, even after years of doing this work and seeing many people's lives transform, sometimes right in front of me. It's almost like there's a doubt that it can even be possible. And each time I'm surprised and in a state of wonder as if it's the first time. When I spoke with Dr. Brad Nelson, who created the body code and the belief code a couple of years ago, I shared this with him and he sort of suggested that he felt the same. And I was sharing with you just before we came on that, I get this all the time. Clients have huge breakthroughs, especially with physical pain during the session itself in front of me with just a few minutes work. And many of them are just like, okay, the pain's gone now, let's move on. But me, who's seen this many times, it's like it's the first time for me every time. I'm like, wow, seriously? Just by me twiddling my fingers here, you're getting better. That's incredible.
That never gets old, really. Even for me now, still, sometimes I'll just think, are you sure? Really? It's gone all the way? You better check. Just walk around.
Yeah, or maybe it's just coincidence. You might come across any number of explanations out there about how this might be possible. Anything from ancient wisdom to quantum physics. And we even looked at this a little bit in our video on the emotion code. But these sorts of explanations tend not to be all that satisfying because they're not really rooted in our daily lives. They seem very abstract and beyond our regular understanding. We have to be clear and honest that there's no clear scientific explanation that's easily graspable for all of this. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that it can't be sufficiently explained scientifically. And the only evidence we really do have is our own experience, whether that's as a healer or as a client working with a healer. And for me, that's the only reason I'm able to carry on doing the work that I do. Because if I wasn't constantly seeing great results from my clients, I'd have no motivation left. It's that keeps me in the work. But there's one question that I find really fascinating and might even suggest that energy healing is not quite as abstract and alien to our lives as we tend to think of it as. It's a question that might seem a bit pointless at first or a bit silly, but if you look at it more closely, it's really revealing. And that is, I simply ask the person to raise their right arm. And when they do it, to explain how the decision to raise the arm led to the action. The normal reaction is that it's obvious. The decision triggers the neurons to have a certain reaction and they send the signals necessary to the arm and it lifts, and it's a very simple to explain closed system. But if we look closely, there's a step missing because we don't think of thought and decision as a physical thing that's wholly rooted in the physical world and nothing else. And yet the neural system that's causing the action to happen is physical. So the missing step is, how does that decision, which is not physical, influence a body that is physical? There's no known mechanism for this. And we don't expect to see it in our daily lives. We don't think that I'll look at this piece of paper and just by deciding that it will rise, that it does rise. That tends not to happen in life. Even moving the arm, we don't think I'm able to do by my thought. I'm only able to influence the neurons with my non-physical thought. So how does the non-physical thought affect the physical neurons in the brain? It's a question that's been fascinating philosophers for centuries, and they've come up with two possibilities, neither of which is very satisfying. The first is that everything is physical, including the thought. So the thought is not something that is separate from the neurons in the brain. The thought is what arises out of neural activity in the brain. And so then that sort of solves the problem in a sense, because if thought is physical and neurons are physical, then it's very easy to understand how they can affect each other. It really is a closed system in that case. But it has implications. If thought is physical, then all of the physical world's rules apply to it. The rules of cause and effect, the rules of action and inaction. And it means that whatever we think can only be caused by other physical things being physical itself. There's nothing else, there's no mechanism for anything that's not physical to affect the physical world. So if the thought is physical, then the thought is only determined in precise detail by the state of the physical world before the thought happened. In other words, it means that we don't have any agency in our thoughts. We're not really thinking them. We're just undergoing the inevitable thoughts, and there's no possibility of anything else. Technically, this is possible. Technically, there are some philosophers who really think that this is how things work, but it's so deterministic in the sense of taking our agency out of everything in our lives that it's so counterintuitive and so extreme in a sense that it wouldn't be reasonable to simply assume that this is how things work. The second way of thinking is that, as we tend to expect, thoughts aren't physical. They're something that we do have some agency over, but that leaves open the question, it doesn't resolve the question of how that thinking interacts with the neurons in the brain. And demonstrably it does, because the neurons do what the thoughts tell them to do. So neither of these basic explanations is satisfactory. So this sort of suggests that as long as we're not all predetermined machines, there's some sort of interface that we don't know about, that we're not aware of yet, between the mental world of thoughts and the physical world of neurons that can enable something like my thought, my decision to raise my arm, to result in my raising of the arm. Whatever that mechanism is that enables the thought to control the body through the neurons, the very small neurons, is probably the same mechanism used by energy healing to enable healing effects to take place energetically. Ultimately, it's only our experience that can enable us to make our own sense of this. I know that I can raise my right arm because I have countless experience of doing that, and I can do it on demand. I'm also personally very confident in energy healing because I've seen many, many times the changes that it's made in the lives of people I've worked with. If you'd like to find out more about how we work, you can check out our YouTube channel, where you'll find explainer videos, sample healing sessions and testimonials, or visit our website where you can read about this in more depth and book a session. We'll be back again soon, but in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some wise words from back in the Renaissance.